Kodiak. Today we're talking about Berachain again, and specifically we're going to go into depth into probably one of the biggest protocols on Berachain in their ecosystem. It's Kodiak, and I think now is a pretty good time for you to all get a very good understanding of what Kodiak is. Make sure you're prepared because mainnet is just around the corner. Anyway, with these deep dives, we like to cover everything that you need to know, and so we're going to cover pretty much backstory around DEXs and of course the Berachain DEX wars, and then we're going to go into Kodiak, all of the different features, what you need to know about how it works, POL, all of that jazz, and of course at the end we're going to do the bull bear case and my investment thesis too. No financial advice as always, this is just my personal opinions. So yeah, let's dive in, shall we? Now, first thing that we're going to talk about, every single chain has its own native DEX. We've seen this many times, and you've got the likes of Uniswap on Ethereum, PancakeSwap on BSC, Aerodrome on some of the L2s like Base. You've got Jupiter there for Solana, Camelot for Arbitrum, Joe for Avalanche. It's just something that we've always seen time and time again. I think we're going to see the same thing for Berachain too. There will be this kind of native DEX. Now, some of you who are kind of clued on are going to be like, hold on a second, Waj, what are you talking about? Berachain already has its DEX. It's called BEX, right? This is it. And you're right, it does have its own native kind of application. But there's one thing about BEX that these other kind of protocols don't have. Firstly, the exchange itself doesn't have its own token, so it doesn't have any external token incentives that it can use. It won't be plugged into kind of other ecosystem apps in the same way that a non-foundation protocol can be. It doesn't have external features or products that some of the newer DEXs are offering, and we're talking about some of the cool fancy stuff that's coming out in the DEX world right now. It's also quite basic actually. And so I think there's still an opportunity for one of the DEXs within Berachain to really take the limelight and be like some of these that we see on screen. Now, in terms of DEXs on Berachain, there's quite a few. And so one of the questions I'm thinking is there going to be a DEX war on Berachain? Who's going to win? Something that was really, really interesting was I managed to get some of the top DEXs, Kodiak, Honeypot, Bear, there are actually others as well, and kind of have a chat with all of them to see, which one is going to be the winner, which one is going to be the high quality winner that's going to be in the same category as these when Berachain goes live. Well, maybe there will be a war, but maybe actually some of these will all do well. But either way, I think there's going to be a ton of opportunity for all of these DEXs, specifically Kodiak. Why? Well, there's a lot of new attention coming to the ecosystem. It's a new ecosystem, of course. There's going to be lots of liquidity that's bridging in on day one. And those who are fast and capture the attention of all of the users are the ones that are going to win. Now, I think the others can still win, and that's partially due to how proof of liquidity, Berachain's economic advantage, makes things more like a player versus environment kind of game rather than PvP, which is what we've had over the bear market. But I think if you look at all of these things, Kodiak has so far dominated, and I think they are leading the distribution when it comes to DEXs on Berachain. And this is all through what they've been able to achieve in the last year and a bit whilst being on Berachain's testnet. So what actually is Kodiak? So Kodiak is an AMM DEX, has a number of different products and features. This is what it looks like. Just like kind of any other DEX, really, you've got your main swap function where you can go from one asset to another. Now, I think everyone who's watching this probably has used a DEX before. If you haven't, then I think great, because you're new to DeFi and I think you're going to have lots of fun. But in terms of like the specifics of what Kodiak's products offering is, they've got the V2 DEX, which is where you can essentially provide liquidity from a price of anything from 0 to infinity. You've got the V3 DEX, which is where you can concentrate your liquidity. They have ALMs, which stands for Automated Liquidity Management, essentially automating your liquidity for you. You don't have to worry about the ranges and things like that. They've got the Panda Factory, which is a token launchpad. They also have an option protocol as well. Now, these pools will be enabled with proof of liquidity, which is, as I mentioned earlier, Berachain's economic advantage over pretty much every other chain. And I think this is going to be one of the key reasons why I think Berachain is going to be really, really exciting. I think we're going to see lots of liquidity, lots of volume, and naturally that means I think as a DEX there's much more potential than some of the other chains around. So how do you provide liquidity? I mean, again, it looks very similar to what you may be used to as well, where this is a V3 pool. Again, you can kind of decide the minimum and maximum price of the assets that you want to kind of provide liquidity for in a concentrated pool, I should say. The more concentrated, the higher your fees and are going to be, but there are some things that you do have to keep in mind, such as making sure that your assets are in range as well. One thing that's interesting is islands, which are these automated liquidity management strategies. Again, you kind of just have to deposit into these, and all of the hard work will be done for you automatically. This is because actually managing a V3 position can be quite difficult at times. You can go out of range, you have to worry about impermanent loss. I mean, it's quite difficult. Kodiak have their custom algorithm to enable this and manage this all for you, make sure that your pools are always in range. They don't have any performance fee nor management fee right now, which is nice, and I think this is going to be probably one of the most used features available. There are also sweetened islands, which are essentially island pools that have some extra additional token rewards. In order to kind of earn these, you do have to lock tokens, and you can see you've got a slider. You move the slider across. The longer you lock, the more the yield. The more the yield is. It's pretty straightforward. Yeah, I think islands are going to be really, really interesting, and we'll talk about this probably in a little bit more detail when we go over POL on Kodiak. So one of the other products is also the Panda Factory, and this is essentially where you can deploy a token in minutes. Now, this token goes on a bonding curve, so it's got a bonding curve mechanic. Once it hits a certain market cap, liquidity gets seeded on the main V2 Kodiak DEX. You probably are familiar with some of this if you've been in the meme coin trenches over the last year or so. But yeah, this is what it looks like. You'll get an idea of kind of all of the meme coins that are launching at the moment. You can actually launch your own one in seconds. You just add an image, add a token name, add a symbol, add a description, and boom, you're good to go. And you can kind of decide what the market cap should end at. So like how much you're gonna need the market cap to go to before it graduates onto the V2 DEX as well. This is obviously very similar to Pump Fun, which I think many of you are also familiar with. It is the token launch pad on Solana that's gone absolutely insane. So the question I'm posing is, can Kodiak be the Pump Fun of Berachain? I think with its mindshare and distribution advantage being, the biggest or one of the biggest ecosystem apps when it comes to the number of testnet users, when it comes to the number of followers that they have, the integrations that they have. We're going to talk about all of this as well later. But I think with all of that, it does seem like it will be one of the places where people would like to launch meme coins. The fact is, all this product's all done as well, so it's going to be ready to launch on mainnet. And I think by that point, they could probably add some extra cool features to it as well. That would make it a little bit more interesting. Now, Pump Fun itself has done 300 million plus in fees just since March 2024. Clearly, like one of the craziest innovations this cycle when it comes to revenue generating protocols. For 7 million addresses, 4.5 million tokens launched, just a crazy number. Can Kodiak even capture some of this? Possibly. And I think one of the reasons why is because Berachain has this very memetic-like culture to it. And I do think like memes are a very important part of how Berachain will go. And so I think we will see lots of people launching meme coins, and they probably will do a lot of it on Kodiak anyway. Now, here's one thing that I think really helps Kodiak stand apart, and it is the Kodiak validator. Now, on Berachain, something that's really, really important is this whole relationship with protocols, the users, which is the same on every other chain, but the validators as well. And part of the reason is because on Berachain, through proof of liquidity, validators send rewards into the ecosystem. And what's really interesting is that Kodiak actually have their own validator. They're actually one of the biggest validators around at the moment, number 2 when it comes to testnet. And I think being a native app is actually a really, really good thing because it generally means higher delegation. I think what you'll find is that a lot of Kodiak users will be delegating their BGT to the Kodiak validator itself. Now, who's this going to benefit? Firstly, it's going to benefit the Kodiak users themselves, because that means that there's going to be higher rewards going into various different LPs on, let's say, V2 or V3 or ALMs, and therefore they're going to have higher yields. And that's purely because of the BGT rewards. Secondly, the people who actually delegate to Kodiak may receive direct rewards from the Kodiak validator itself. It could be in the KDK token, which we'll talk about in a moment too. could be from some of the partner protocols. Imagine if there is a protocol that wants to get, a good amount of liquidity, launch it on Kodiak. There may be a case where they actually have to provide some incentives to the Kodiak validators. And I think this is a really, really interesting moat that I think Kodiak have that really helps them to stand apart from pretty much all other DEXs on Berachain right now. Now, POL on Kodiak is going to be very, very important. How are you going to participate in POL? Well, when you provide liquidity, and this can be, let's say, on a V2 DEX, what happens is you get LP tokens. And what you can do is you can take those LP tokens, you can go to Berachain, and you can see this directly here, and you'll be able to stake. So, for example, let's say you provide liquidity for Honey USDC, Honey being the stablecoin of Berachain. What you can do is you can deposit that LP token directly here, and the Kodiak validator could actually provide some incentives here. Now, in this image, they're not. This is just a testnet image, by the way. We'll see what it actually what it is like on mainnet. But I think this is really, really interesting because LPs now will be able to earn BGT. And this, again, just means that rewards are generally much, much better than pretty much any other chain if you're looking at like extra incentives. Now, you might think, hold on a second, why have you put no POL for V3 pools? Now, this is because with V3 pools, there isn't like a standardized LP token that you kind of get when you provide liquidity. Rather, everyone has their own individual NFT, which represents their own position. This is why I think islands will be really, really powerful, because they contain V3 pools. They're managed directly by Kodiak, and they'll also have their own receipt token. So islands will have receipt tokens that can be staked on Berachain. And so I think that islands will be really, really interesting because of this. And I suspect that islands will attract a lot of liquidity because of the higher yields from being concentrated and also the BGT that comes with it too. But yeah, I mean, number 2 validator, this is a really, really powerful statement from Kodiak, being able to show that they are able to, get attention. And I think this just goes to show how strong that distribution actually is within the Bera ecosystem. One thing that's made it even stronger is the partnerships and integrations that they have. They have integrations with like the native ecosystem apps, external protocols that are on other chains coming to Berachain, and a real focus on like assets that will generate lots and lots of TVL and volume, the likes of ETH assets, BTC assets, LSTs, LRTs, big assets. So you can see like just on screen, IVX, Smiley, Yeet, Beraboro, Ramen, Origami, D2, Gummy, Infrared, Ooga Booga, like so many integrations. In fact, I couldn't even put all of them on. I've just put some of them on. There's actually so many. But I think this just goes to show like Kodiak's BD team, props to them, man. Some interesting Kodiak integrations I thought I would mention. Infrared. So Infrared, basically with the largest LST, you could say, with iBGT. And what will happen is you can earn iBGT Kodiak tokens and IRED tokens from the Infrared and Kodiak whitelisted pools. So I think that will be really, really interesting. So those pools will have some extra emissions. IVX with yield generating LP tokens. So you can take an LP token. Let's say you provide liquidity on Kodiak. You can take that, use it as collateral within the IVX portfolio and trade against that. So I think that's really, really interesting because you can have a yield generating asset, which is an LP, obviously earns yield from all of the trading fees, and you can trade against that with leverage, which is really, really nice. Ramen have a very, very powerful relationship with Kodiak, where I think the protocols who raise money on Ramen's launchpad, that liquidity will likely end up getting seeded on Kodiak. So I think for every big token launch that we see through Ramen, it's going to end up on Kodiak. The Beraboro one is also really, really interesting. Why? Because Beraboro stablecoin NECT and iBGT LP tokens on Kodiak can actually be staked within Infrared, and then you can get iBGT rewards that can be used on Beraboro to borrow more NECT. That can be minted. You can kind of repeat that as many times as you want, more leverage. I think Beraboro is going to be fantastic for that. But in reality, look, this is the actual ecosystem around Kodiak. You can see so many different applications across pretty much every single sector is integrated within Kodiak. So I mean, this is actually a very, very old graphic. It should actually be updated, but yeah, I think just goes to show like actually there is a lot of stuff happening within Kodiak. Kodiak's going to pretty much contain all of these different ecosystems in one, all of these different apps within their own ecosystem. And I think this is obviously going to be very, very beneficial for Kodiak when it comes to how much revenue they're going to be making. Another thing that really helped Kodiak is going through Build-A-Bearer, which is Berachain's accelerator program or incubation program. And I think they are the only DEX to have had this opportunity. So that clearly kind of has helped them, whether it's with raising, or whether in general, just like their go-to-market. I think this has been a really powerful thing for them. And of course, it wouldn't happen without like the Chads in the team. So Bertik and Rodman, I think, have been basically the key players really here. But of course, you know, you've got all of these other guys as well who have been fantastic, including Zero as well, who actually gave me this Kodiak shirt when I met him earlier this year. So yeah, I think this is a really, really strong team, and I believe they are probably going to expand even further. They did actually raise $2 million from some really, really good quality VCs as well. Some great angels as well on top of that. So yeah, I think in general, Kodiak seems like they're in a really, really good place right now. Now, the Kodiak token is obviously something that all of us are excited for. Why? Well, because of speculation, of course, but also because of Kodiak's token model. And they have an X token model. You may be familiar with this. You may have seen it around Camelot. The DEX on Arbitrum actually have this token model, the X token model. They have X Grail. Here we're going to have X KDK. And KDK is the token for Kodiak itself. Now, what's interesting about this is protocol rewards are given to XKDK stakers, and the distribution of these rewards is weekly. And what's interesting is that, you know, Kodiak is going to earn fees from all of their different products. Now, if you LP on V2 and V3, 35% of the fees are going to be going to XKDK holders. The Panda Factory, I'm not too sure what the fees are going to be like on that. That's to be determined. But we can see here, Kodiak DEX fees are going to be 65% for the LPs. It says redacted 35%. I believe this is going to be going to KDK stakers. And this is going to be really, really interesting, because you might be thinking, hold on a second, that means LPs aren't being compensated that well. Well, they will, because there's all those external rewards coming through BGT, through IRAD, through their partner protocols. And I think this is like what makes Kodiak like a really, really interesting DEX. Will there be an airdrop? I'm pretty sure there will be. I'm pretty sure testnet users will be eating through the request for application process. So yeah, I'm sure Kodiak will be doing pretty well there, as will all of the other Berachain protocols too. Now, there is Boyko as well. For those of you who don't know, Royco, which is a kind of new protocol, have got this marketplace for liquidity incentives, and they've created a Berachain version of this called Boyko, which is going to launch before the chain actually goes live. So you'll see Boyko go live pretty soon, I think, and you'll have the opportunity to deposit your assets from any chain, let's say ETH, let's say from Arbitrum, from Base, let's say assets like ETH, Bitcoin, stablecoins, and you'll be able to deposit them into various different protocols. Kodiak is likely going to be in this as well. Lock your assets for 3 to 6 months and earn juicy rewards. Now, I'm speculating here. I have no idea what it's going to look like in reality, but I think that, you know, you might have a chance to earn Kodiak tokens, Royco points, and some juicy yields by participating in Boyko. And I think this is going to be an interesting opportunity. Just depends on what the yields look like, how long you have to lock them for, and kind of compare them across all other protocols. But I think Kodiak is probably going to cook here, so I will be looking to see how I can personally take advantage of it. Probably will make some videos on that too if you're interested, but I think Royco is definitely something that all of you should take a look at. I think it's a pretty cool concept. Now, as we always like to do, we're going to cover the bull case and the bear case, and then we'll go into the investment thesis. First of all, let's go over some of the things that I think are very, very bullish. Firstly, there's a wide variety of products, whether it's V2, V3, the ALMs, the Panda Factory, and now even the option product as well, which you didn't really focus on too much in this video, but probably can do later. I think the Panda Factory introduces a product that we know has had success on other chains. I think we've seen that it can be a real money printer, especially on Solana. I think if there is a meme coin craze on Berachain, which I do expect there to be, Kodiak are positioned really, really well now, and I think they can make a lot of money from it as well. As we mentioned as well, like Kodiak are BD monsters. They've integrated through so many different protocols. I think on Berachain there's going to be 150. I think probably now there's closer to 200 plus protocols. Probably the vast majority of them have some sort of integration on Kodiak, maybe with their native token or maybe through something else. And therefore, I think there's an insane amount of liquidity and an insane amount of volume kind of coming to Kodiak. And also running one of the top validators on Berachain right now is rank number 2. I think undoubtedly is going to be massive for them when it comes to POL, but also kind of them having a moat and controlling incentives. I think that's really, really, really important. And we saw this kind of play out with some of the leaders in the curve wars. Back in last cycle, we saw those who had real significant amount of VECRV. They were really able to dictate the way that incentives were played. I think Kodiak can do that themselves because they're running their own validator. Tokenomics also seem pretty interesting because there's a revenue share model, and I think they should capture significant fees because of the volume. They're the distribution kings when it comes to Berachain right now. They're the only DEX built on or incubated by Builder Bearer. They raised well. So yeah, I think things are generally going to escalate quite quickly for Kodiak, and things are looking pretty good. Now, I think it's fair for me to also talk about the bear case as well. And I'm going to talk about just a few points here. Maybe you've got some counter arguments for me, but I do think that there are some things that I think could improve. And I'm just going to list a few of them here. We'll talk through them anyway. So product-wise, the first point that I've really written about is this idea that is the DEX really that novel? I mean, it's a V2 with a V3 DEX. We've seen this many, many times. Is there anything new there? I mean, if you're a real techie and you like to your stuff with restaking or AVSs or MEV or like your TEE kind of protocol, this definitely isn't that. One thing that I really would have liked to see is like some implementation of V4, like V4 DEXs, I should say, implementing hooks, because you can do all kinds of crazy cool stuff there, whether it's rehypothecation of your liquidity or like shape-shifting liquidity. Maybe the vast majority of people don't really care about it. Maybe it's just me because I'm a bit nerdy and I like that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think that's probably just one thing that I would say. I think I mentioned this point before, the second point, where like LPs, because they're only getting 65% of the trading fees, will other DEXs kind of offer 100%, and therefore will the APRs be a little bit higher for those guys? Possibly, but I think I did mention that Kodiak can incentivize the rest through their own token, through Infrared's token, through their other ecosystem tokens, and importantly through BGT. So I don't think this is going to be that concerning. Rather there's more a value accruing to the token, which I think is more interesting. What happens if meme coins lose interest, though? That is something that I am thinking about. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, especially when we're about to go live, hopefully fairly soon. So I don't think meme coins are going anywhere. Actually, rather, I think meme coins are probably just going to keep gaining interest. So yeah, but I mean, if they do, then I think volume and maybe a lot of Kodiak's fees go away. Depends. We'll see how Berachain kind of goes anyway. I think Berachain DEXs in general are quite competitive. There's quite a few that we mentioned on the initial screen. But I think, yeah, competing with BEX, like the native DEX on Berachain, is already tough in itself. So I think that will be interesting, seeing the kind of, especially the larger kind of assets, your Bitcoins and your ETHs, seeing that liquidity, or even the Bearer Honey kind of liquidity on BEX versus Kodiak is going to be interesting. There is going to be some fragmentation there, and that is not a good thing. I think if there wasn't BEX, then I think Kodiak would be a no-brainer. The fact that there is BEX does mean that there is going to be some fragmentation of both liquidity and volume, so that does take away from some of the possible value capture that Kodiak can take. But I think, as I mentioned at the start, those other features can really make up for it, really. Token-wise, are DEX tokens that good? I mean, do you all have DEX tokens in your portfolio? How many of you are holding them? That is like a question that you can reply to in the comment section below. How many DEX tokens perform well? I think some of them do, some of them don't. It's not really like the craziest narrative, being a DEX. It's not like, your crazy meme coin or your AI agents or anything like that at all. But in general, yeah, they're kind of stable, I guess. And I think some of them do really well. Some of them don't. And I think, you have to remember, this is a token that has had VC investors participate in it. And so what is the valuation going to be like on launch? Is it going to be too high? I don't think so. I'd like to think that they don't do it too high, but I think that just another thing to kind of think about. There are going to be people who have exposure to the asset itself. So yeah, don't get dumped on. Now, here's the most exciting part. We're going to talk about the investment thesis, and I always love to do this. We're going to have a lot of moon maths here as well, but I think you're going to enjoy it. Now, Kodiak's the #1 DEX on Berachain, in my opinion, and we've seen the native ecosystem DEXs for a lot of those chains that I mentioned at the start of this video perform really, really well. I've actually included a lot of them here. So we've got Uniswap on ETH mainnet, hit 22 bill last cycle, 17 bill FTV today. You got PancakeSwap on BSC, 7 bill last cycle, 1.3 billion today. You got Camelot on Arbitrum with 300 million FTV during Arbitrum season, 120 million today. You've got Joe on Avalanche, $500 million last cycle, 300 mil FTV almost today. And then you've got some of the ones that are kind of around from this cycle. Aerodrome on Base, 3 billion FTV. Velodrome on Optimism, 300 million FTV. And then you've got Radium on Solana, which is going crazy because of meme coins, 3.1 billion FTV today. Orca as well, over $500 million. And then even some of the DEXs on Sui and Aptos, like Thesis, 400 million FTV today. So yeah, some pretty, I mean, just gives you a gauge on kind of what the valuations can be like for DEXs. And so I'd like to think that Kodiak's going to be in the middle of this. Okay, I don't think it's going to be the lowest. I don't think it's going to flip Uniswap either. But I think there's a chance that it could be in the middle of this. And so it gives you an idea of like where we could possibly go. Now, here are the DEX volumes from today and this week. And you can see that like the top DEXs are doing like, tens of billions in volume every week. And the kind of middle ones are doing like 5 billion. And the ones at the bottom are doing like 1 to 2 billion. And the ones at the bottom are still worth like hundreds and hundreds of millions. Like Thesis, for example, it's worth 400 million and it's doing 1.5 billion in volume, which, okay, seems pretty reasonable actually. Now, in terms of like actual chain volume itself, I think Berachain with POL should sit pretty high on this list, and I'm talking about this list of all of the chains and how much volume they actually do. For me, I think Berachain is a top 5 chain, especially when it comes to like the total things to do. Janitor, he actually kind of tweeted about this concept of the total number of things to do outweigh a lot of the other chains. I think that's kind of one thing that gives Berachain a real advantage. Could Berachain overtake Base and Arbitrum in volume? Possibly, yes, I think they could. Perhaps less so Base now, but certainly I think Berachain can really compete with Arbitrum's volume. And so therefore, we're talking about 10 billion plus in like weekly volume. And I think Kodiak has a chance of getting a lot of that share actually. So should Kodiak be a top 10 DEX overall? I think, yeah, given the chain volume that Berachain will get, if we're talking about 10 billion in kind of overall volume, I think Kodiak will kind of capture a lot of that. Maybe it's 2 billion, maybe it's 3 billion, maybe it's 5 billion. I don't know, but I think it certainly could capture that. The question is, how much volume can Kodiak actually get? I think if we take like 7-day volume for like the top 10 DEXs, I think it's possible for Kodiak to be in that range between 1 billion and 5 billion. So we're going to do some moon maths now. I've got some conservative kind of views and then a really, really bullish scenario. I think the conservative one is this. Let's say there's only 1 billion in weekly volume with a 0.3% fee share on swaps. I think that gives you $3 million in weekly volume, in weekly revenue, I should say. 35% of this profit share with Kodiak stakers gives you around $1 million a week, aka $55 million annualized. And at 25 million multiplier, I think that means we could get 1 billion to 1.5 billion FTV. Now, a really bullish scenario would be a little bit different to that. I think with a really bullish scenario, we could see maybe, let's say, 5 billion in weekly volume. And I think if we did see something like that, then Kodiak is really going to be competing with the likes of Aerodrome and Radium. I think it's going to be at that kind of level. And I think if we are at that kind of level, we're talking about $15 million in weekly revenue. You annualize that and yeah, you're talking about, making crazy amounts. I believe it's, $270 million annualized with the 35% fee share with Kodiak stakers. So yeah, that would be pretty insane. I think when it comes to that level, because we're kind of at the same level as Aerodrome and Radium, I think we're talking about a 3 billion FDV, somewhere around that. Probably could be a little bit higher because of the premium from Berachain, but I think ultimately depends on how things go there. That's kind of how I see things at the moment, but I think this is definitely very bullish, and I think a more conservative approach would be kind of where I mentioned things before, that around the 1 billion mark, with kind of where I see volume at the moment. But of course, we'll have to wait and see. The chain is hopefully going to be going live fairly soon, and I think therefore Kodiak is also going to be going live fairly soon, and I think that creates a very exciting opportunity coming at the start of 2025 for everyone who's involved. So I think, yeah, that pretty much wraps everything up. That covers pretty much everything that we wanted to cover today in terms of Kodiak. Probably could do another update video in future once the actual chain goes live, once Kodiak goes live, maybe to cover kind of how things are going and see if my moon maths make sense or not. Let me know what your thoughts are about Kodiak 2. I'm interested to know, are you bullish, are you bearish? What do you think about Berachain 2? Let me know in the comment section below. Otherwise, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you're watching this on Twitter. Give it a like, give it a retweet, and we'll be back with plenty more Berachain and in general DeFi or just in general on-chain content coming your way in due time.